you know, I've never been a PowerPoint guy, but the government would always have its very sort of slick, very well-packaged PowerPoint presentation. And this was no different. And it was lengthy, and it had all kinds of fancy slides, and you know, things moving, and some of you know how to do this. Yolanda probably knows how to do it. You know, where you have like different things moving in the slide, and it all looked very kind of cool and slick and fancy. And the defense attorney, I think, to try to make the point to the jury that look at this powerful government, and here's all I have. He took a piece of paper, kind of like the one I have here, and put it on the screen, and so that was like supposed to be his PowerPoint. And the point he was trying to make is like, look how unfair this is, and in hopes of maybe getting some sympathy for his client. Talking to the jury, they didn't receive it like that. The jury said, well, you know, the government comes in looking professional, looking polished, looking like they're really putting forward a real case, and the defense attorney just put this like handwritten thing on the screen. And in their minds, they're thinking, well, that means that the government must be taking this more seriously, they must be more professional, they must be, this is clearly the side that I should be siding with. Whereas the defense attorney, yeah, I mean, he just wrote some stuff on a piece of paper, and so that just shows that they weren't as serious. And so I'm of course going to side with the person who seems more serious. And so it just shows the need to have well-resourced defense attorneys. And you know, in the federal court system, there are really sort of, I guess, three categories. You have the Federal Defender's Service, which I'll say is quite good. You know, I often say, and I should maybe not say it so often, but I do often say, if I ever picked up a case, like I'd be happy to be defended by our Federal Defender Service. I don't know if that's true everywhere. It's probably not true in a lot of state systems, because in a lot of state systems, again, you're dealing with fewer resources, you're dealing with crushing caseloads that far outweigh what the government lawyers are dealing with. But in the federal system, in the courthouse where I sit, all kidding aside, I've had friends unfortunate enough to have family members who pick up cases, and they're asking me, look, we qualify for a federal defender, should we get a quote-unquote real lawyer? What I actually tell them is the federal defenders are very good lawyers in our system, and if you qualify, you should do that. And so that's sort of the first category, and then you have the sort of really expensive, high-powered, there are probably some of them here at Foley and Lardner, white-collar defense lawyers, and you know, they tend to be former federal prosecutors, and they're doing really well, and those are good lawyers. But in the middle, sometimes you have lawyers who are, again, either the solos or small firms, and some of them are really well resourced because they've done well and they've made a lot of money, usually from other cases, and so they're able to sort of put on a case that matches what the government's doing. But then some of them just aren't as well resourced. And so it ends up, you know, even sitting there as the judge, you end up having significant concerns as to what you're seeing, whether you're seeing what the adversarial system isn't designed to be. Because it's essential that for the adversarial system to work, the government's proof has to be tested. The government, they're good people. Some of them remain friends of mine, but they're human, right? And so whether it's a police officer, a federal agent, a prosecutor, certainly in every, you know, we get into the sort of bad apples spoils the bunch theory, but in every, I think another sort of cliche is in every bunch there is a bad apple. And so, you know, yeah, so there are some who just are bad apples. But then there are also some who just try their best and make mistakes. And what the adversarial process doesn't work unless you have somebody well-resourced on the other side, able to really probe at that and push at that and attack at that. And so if you don't have that, if you have attorneys who do not have the resources to really challenge the government, one has to raise the question as to whether the adversarial system is working. And so it's important, it's essential to make sure that lawyers, that criminal defense lawyers are being given the resources that they need. And then there's a real problem for the system when it doesn't happen, because some who are, you know, defense oriented, and I won't ask anybody to raise hands to see which side you come out on, but some who are defense oriented would say, yeah, the problem is obvious, and if you get a bad lawyer, you get a bad defense, and that's really what's wrong with the system. Some on the law enforcement side would say, well, what's the problem? I mean, you know, people should get convicted, and that's a good thing. And the resources should be with law enforcement. But even if that's your perspective, having someone who is ineffective, particularly if they're constitutionally ineffective, does nothing but frustrate the system. When I certainly sitting there as a judge, when I have a prosecutor who is putting on a strong case and then a defense attorney who doesn't even seem to be providing sort of the bare minimum of a defense, it raises real questions in my mind, just as I'm sitting there in real time. Because as the judge, I'm not supposed to step into the defense lawyer's shoes, right? I feel sort of a general responsibility to make sure that something that looks like justice is taking place in front of me. But at the same point, it's not my job and not my role to sort of step into the shoes of the defense lawyer and to say object when he's not objecting to something that's clearly objectionable being done by the prosecutor. So it causes real problems and causes a lack of faith, frankly, in the system when that's happening. But even beyond that, you know, if it reaches a point where something is constitutionally ineffective, well, now we might end up just doing the trial over again a year from now, 2 years from now, when the defense attorney, where the defendant gets convicted, and somebody looks at the record and says, you know, this guy was pretty much asleep at the wheel, not doing anything throughout the trial. Well, now you have an ineffective assistant claim, and the government has to expend those resources all over again. For a victim crime, the victim has to be put through the problem of a trial all over again. The court has the burden of expense of trying that case all over again. And so it causes a significant problem for both sides when you have lawyers who, again, either aren't well-resourced or just for other reasons are providing ineffective assistance. So again, the need for more talented lawyers to step in and fill that gap. I think there are two areas. I'm going to talk about the other one in a second. I think there are two areas in our system that are suffering from a need for more talent. Not that there isn't any talent. Some of the best lawyers in the world are criminal defense attorneys. But there are more individuals in need of capable defense lawyers than there are capable defense lawyers. And so it simply is, I think, critical for more talented, some of those individuals who Yolanda pointed to, who aren't practicing, who have gone to law school, who are talented, who for whatever reason decide to do something else. Keeping more of those in the system as defense lawyers, I think, is something that could be of significant help. The second thing, and it's interesting, when I talk about my career, and I was having this conversation with some law students recently, you know, for those who don't know, I think you'll understand, I was a federal prosecutor. Well, first I was at Weill Gotshal as a corporate litigator, then as a federal prosecutor, and then as a judge. If I were to start my career over, I would do it completely differently. And my career's worked out for me, so I should be careful how I say that. Things have worked out okay for me, but if I were to do it again, in terms of filling a need, I would do my career differently. First, as I indicated, being a defense lawyer, that's a place where there's a need. There's more need than there is supply. At the U.S. Attorney's Office, you know, the day I quit, and I don't want to say quit as if I stormed out, it wasn't that at all, but the day, on my last day, some super talented person came in right behind me and filled that spot. So that's not a place where there's a great need, but you do see it in the defense bar. And the other place, I say, and I joke with my law clerks all the time, saying this is what we're going to do one day, is going out and starting a small plaintiff's law firm. That's the other place, defense lawyer and plaintiff's law firms. Those are the two places where I feel like there is more need than supply. And so, yeah, if I were doing that, I would start as a defense attorney and then go start my own plaintiff's law firm. I might still do that someday. I joke about it. And sometimes it's not even a joke. There are simply so many cases in our system that have merit, that there's something there, but there's not a lawyer who is articulating the there, right? So there's a there, but it's not being presented to the court, it's not being presented to the jury in a way where someone can actually see it. And that happens in two ways. One, when there's simply no attorney and we have a pro se plaintiff, and we get a number of those. I think the last stats we pulled showed that something like, I think it was as high as like 35 or 40% of our cases are filed initially pro se. Now, a large number of those are what's called prisoner cases. Those are cases filed by individuals currently incarcerated who are suing based on their conditions. But some of those cases have merit. Many of those cases have merit. But they're simply, again, not being represented. But even when you subtract out all the prisoner cases, and I don't mean to subtract them because they're not important, but they're just a lot of them. Even when you